Proverbs talks about what women bring to the table. It doesn't talk about elevating them romantically or anything of the sort.
Mm,
It talks about what they owe the family coming
mm.
into it. What do you bring of substance, of value that contributes to a great foundation for a relationship and for its continued stability and success? The time of women being coddled princesses and men being white knights on white stallions has got to go.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Ancient Intelligence. You've got your host, Anya Shack, here, and today I'm joined by a guest that I've been really looking forward to speaking to. Welcome, Paul Elam.
Hi, good to be here.
Yes, if those of you that don't know, Paul is quite a well-known man in the space and in the advocacy for men's rights. He founded A Voice for Men, the International Conference on Men's Issues. He inspired the making of the Red Pill movie that aired, I believe, in 2016. And he's been a men's advocate and advisor for many decades, and he has counseled many men throughout his life. And what I love about him is just how deeply he cares about men's issues and how thoughtful and how much meaning exists in his work. And so I really wanted to talk to him about men and why men are still misunderstood in 2025 and what we can do about it. So that's why we're here. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So I think one of the things, so I've seen the Red Pill movie. I've watched a lot of your interviews. I've most recently been watching some of the things that you've done where you've interviewed men one-on-one and gotten really deep and personal about their personal experiences. I guess I'm curious, maybe we can start with like the men's movement in general. How did it start? How did you find your way into it? And I think we can go from there.
I think really the better question is why hasn't it started yet, even still? I don't think we have a men's movement. I think we have a shift in consciousness going on right now. There are changes in the way men are beginning to perceive women and perceive themselves. A movement, uh, I don't think so. I don't think that's happening. But we do have a change in consciousness that goes way back. I mean, you can go back to the late 1800s and look at the work of Ernest Belfort Bax. And there were other men in Switzerland and other places during the 1920s that tried to get men's rights conferences off the ground. It didn't happen very much for them. There was an alimony protest in the 1920s and 30s in the United States that literally didn't go anywhere. Then we have second wave feminism that came in the late 60s. And as a sort of an offshoot of that, there was a number of men, and this, which later morphed, I think, more into the men's mythopoetic movement,
Mm-hmm.
but they were men of feminist orientation that believed in their way that they were sort of bringing men into being liberated through the model that women were using through gender equity and a lot of changing focus about what it meant to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And largely, I think, failed for a couple of reasons, especially the mythopoetic movement. It was great gatherings in the woods with guys that never went anywhere politically because they wouldn't take the beliefs that they had in the woods and start applying it in their real lives and their political lives. It just sort of never went anywhere. The rest of the men's so-called movement of the time morphed into a more feminist branch where men were talking about treating themselves sort of like broken women, that if they just learned to express their feelings and to get in touch with their feminine side, that would somehow bring wholeness or healing into their lives. Of course, that petered out too. But what it is now, I think that men are moving in a direction. So I guess technically we call it a movement,
Yeah.
but there is a change in mentality. You see, since the Red Pill movie in particular, you see a literal explosion of online content, at least of the stuff that's happening on social media, that's reflecting a different attitude, a different perspective in men about themselves and about women, about relationships, about marriage, about divorce,
Mm-hmm.
about the
Mm-hmm.
divorce industry. All these things are culminating into, I think, a changing landscape for men that is generally on the positive side. Although I would say that, as being the contrarian that I am, that the mainstay of what passes for red pill content that's out there these days is actually just sort of repackaged blue pill content. It's about chasing skirts and about creating the illusion that you're some sort of god in a human container, and not more grounded stuff that we were trying to lay out in the teens and early 20s.
That's great. Thank you for that. What occurs to me is based on listening to your content and some of the things that you and Janice Fiamengo and some others in your world have said, the big thing that didn't happen in those movements before was calling for accountability from women. And that's kind of like the big thing that needs to happen and hasn't.
And we, as a matter of fact, as to what I was just talking about, with most of the so-called red pill content creators, they're still focused on pleasing women and
Mm,
on avoiding that accountability. There is a small subgroup that I think drives a lot of the thinking that goes on subconsciously in this, that is pushing for more accountability from women, or, I mean, without trying to sound insulting, for any accountability at all,
yeah.
would be a good start.
Yeah.
And of course, the reaction to that is quite hostile, as you might expect.
Totally. Yeah. I find that to be so shocking because after reading things like, G.K. Chesterton, he talks about, domesticity and women and men and everything that was happening as things moved from agricultural to industrial. And he kept talking about what are women's duty? What is the duty for women? And I find that if we're going to ask men what's their duty, we've got to ask women what's their duty as well and to whom. And so I think these are great questions.
The question, I think, as it applies to relationships that we seem to be inching toward asking women is, what do you bring to the table?
Yeah.
And sorry, but the answer of my wonderful self is not an answer to
Yeah.
that question. What do you bring of substance, of value, that contributes to a great foundation for a relationship and for its continued stability and success? And so far, we're hearing crickets, but at least the question is starting to be formulated in the minds of men.
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. I mean, honestly, as someone in her mid 30s that really wants to get married and have a family, and this is the kind of the crisis of our times, how much more difficult it is for 20 somethings and 30 somethings to figure that out. It's something I'm really interested in trying to figure out.
I understand. I mean, and it's not exactly a great flourishing environment for starting relationships these days. There is severe mistrust between the sexes. There is sort of a competition for who's now more put off with the other.
Hmm.
Uh, I think that's growing pains. It's something that's socially we have to go through, but I think it will cost one or two generations of men and women the realization of
Yeah.
of their dreams in terms of family.
Yeah. I find that it seems to me like trust is a huge issue. Like trust has been eroded between the sexes completely. How do you think we got here? I know that there's a couple different things. You talk about gynocentrism and romanticism. I'd be curious, how do you think we got here?
Well, I think a family court system that promotes divorce and gives women loaded guns to use with impunity on their husbands, I think that might have something to do with trust
Mm-hmm.
uh, being degraded. We still live, and I think what we'll eventually get to when I talk about this evolving consciousness is we're eventually going to have to get to the point that we're aware enough of relationship dynamics in the romantic model to understand that the time of women being coddled princesses and men being white knights on white stallions has got to go. We have to put that to bed, and we still can't really even talk about it with each
Mm-hmm.
other the way that the romantic model puts men at a significant disadvantage. It costs them their self-respect to maintain a woman's sense of romance and being wined and dined.
Mm,
That requires man to give up the spoils of his life and to often give up his self-respect to maintain for what? For a childhood fantasy that really never can be sustained in real life.
mm,
And until I think we wake up to that and understand that we're operating on a model that breeds contempt and resentment between the sexes, it makes men not trust women. And also, on
mm,
the other side of that, it breeds what we call hostile dependency in women. Nobody really feels good about somebody else patting their corners all the time in life
mhm,
and making sure that they don't have to put effort into their own lives, or they don't have to ever open their own door or light their own cigarette or pull their chair out and sit down or pay
mm,
half the dinner check, anything like that. Trying to maintain that builds a kind of resentment in women that I think underneath the surface of appreciating the romantic gestures and those things, you find women struggling to assert their own autonomy in life.
mhm,
And it's because we have this infantilizing model that
mm.
puts men in the role of enabler and women in the role of child. Uh,
Yeah.
Not healthy.
Yeah, it seems like completely contradictory. That model and then feminism, the girl boss model, it doesn't make any sense to have both at the same time.
Well, it's sort of like the old adage, we asked women, are you equal or are you special? And they said yes.
Right, right. And it
So
was
feminism has played the romantic card.
yeah,
And then you see to the right side of the political spectrum, the Tradwives and
yeah,
stuff, they play the Gynocentrism card.
yeah,
Uh, they look like $1 million. They're always made up and talking about traditional values when what they really mean is I don't work.
yeah, absolutely. In the end, that's what it all comes down to. So many, typical feminist type women have been so excited to quit their jobs the moment that their partner makes enough money, and they spent 20 years, with the narrative that went against that, right? There's something wrong with you if you do that. So it's just so contradictory. And even as a woman, it's frustrating. I can imagine as a man how frustrating the contradictions must be.
Yes, but I think men sort of instinctively know that if they're dealing with a situation in which women need to be viewed as empowered and independent and strong, that they'll go with that model. And then if
Mm,
the woman needs to be viewed as a victim and powerless and weak, they'll go with that model because they are trained just to make the woman happy. It
mm,
really doesn't, the contradiction doesn't matter to the woman and it doesn't matter to the guy. But underneath there, it builds a current of resentment and
mm.
hostility. And lo and behold, look at what's happened to marriage.
Yeah. So what do you think was the original purpose of that? Like, how did we evolve to this very gynocentric way of thinking over these last however many hundreds of years?
Well, if you look at the fundamentals, it started with William the Ninth of Aquitaine and his daughter, uh,
Mm,
Eleanor of Aquitaine, and commissioning troubadours to spread the word of courtly love and
mm,
romance throughout the European courts. And I think it was a way for women to gain power.
mm.
That they obviously there was always power trade-offs. Men
Yeah.
were powerless in some ways, so were women, and both were powerful in some ways. But this was a way for women to gain more power because it made the romantic model one that crossed all class lines and boundary
Mm,
lines, and men would just be in competition for caretaking, which was not the model before at all.
right.
As a matter of fact, matrimony, uh, we say that instead of patrimony because it signified a time that a woman came to her fullness as an adult human and put the family first
Yep.
and brought that into the table, so to speak, in the marriage.
Absolutely. I mean, that's you just even among archetypes, right? She moves from maiden to mother. Mother is very significant. Mothering and what being a mother even means is very significant. And we could talk about it for hours,
Sure.
and how we've really devalued that in such a big way. And so, Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also, you're speaking about a nobleman in a court. So this is all coming from, the elites and the people that have a lot of time on their hands and are way beyond survival. And
Well, noblemen, but also vassals. I mean, because what the romantic model did is it took the feudal model
okay.
of pledging fealty to his lordship and
Mm,
being willing to serve in his military and die to defend his lands
mm,
if necessary in exchange for something. And they put that as the model for men taking care of women.
mm.
That's how we ended up with guys on their knees,
Yeah,
kneeling as though before royalty,
yeah.
bearing gifts in
Oh,
exchange for love. Um,
fascinating.
and it's like, what could go wrong there? It, and it
Yeah.
only worked, interestingly enough, that worked as a model as long as there was strong legal and social prohibitions on divorce. As
Mm,
long as families had pressure to stay together,
mm-hmm.
it was contained. But the moment you took the pressure off, the social pressure off of, and the stigma away from the divorce, it just exploded and skyrocketed to now, I mean, half of all marriage
Yeah,
ends
yeah,
in failure. And
yeah.
I think that's really what we're seeing there is the failure of the romantic model. It doesn't work,
That's
despite
right.
a long Hollywood tradition of us watching movies that prove to us that it works.
Yeah.
It actually in real life doesn't.
That's such a great point. And as you were speaking, I became very clear that, wow, they just tapped into that evolutionary drive men have to compete. And they, effectively exploited that, is what you're
Sure.
saying. So that makes sense. And then if there's a system that causes men to be the competitors and women to be not accountable for anything, then of course, the sanctity of marriage has kind of been devalued, of course.
Well, yeah, and it's good that you brought up the accountability part again because what people need to understand about the romantic model is that it literally elevates women morally, spiritually,
Mm,
every way above men. They
yeah.
are objects of reverence.
Yes.
And of course, you can't revere another human being for
Yes.
30 years running. It just, life doesn't work that way.
Yes.
People change and they sort of wake up, infatuation wears off. And what do we have now? When infatuation, which carries the romantic model for a while, when
Mm,
that wears off, people hate each other freely.
mm. Yeah.
And guys resent, look at all the money I spent trying to
Yeah.
make her happy and everything. And her with her story on the other side of that too.
Right.
Uh, and
Right.
it's a recipe for disaster.
Right. Absolutely. And I mean, and very few people are tuned in and have done their inner work. And there's a lot of patterns and paradigms based on just whatever they were born into, whether it be abuse or violence or all, you name it, that then becomes the nature of their lives.
Absolutely. And I can't tell you how many men I've talked to that maybe spent years doing everything they could trying to make an insatiable person satiated and failing over and over again, yet they cannot articulate why they keep trying. It's as though they have no understanding. They're not plugged into
Mm,
any other level of self examination or introspection
mm,
that would afford them would say, hey, maybe this isn't a good model. Maybe
mm.
she's a human being and I should expect accountability from her instead of
Right.
trying to please every mood that
Right.
comes my way with her. They're
Yeah.
just absolutely oblivious to it.
And I think it also taps into that male drive towards succeeding and not failing. There's something
Absolutely.
around like if we get divorced, then I failed. It's my failure.
If the marriage fails, it's my failure. And with her model being accountable for nothing, she's like,
Mm,
yes, you're right. It is your fault. It
mm.
is your failure, not mine.
Yeah. Ugh, it's frustrating. I remember a good friend who was really struggling in his marriage, and I remember him just talking about how, she ultimately left, But for a long time, he kept talking about how, but I did everything. I sacrificed everything. I killed myself. Like just explaining to everyone how miserable these last few years were, but never being the one to say, maybe there's something to look at.
We also would be doing a very good service for men if we held them accountable to tell them, do you understand? All right, so you basically chased every mood swing she had, every changing desire. You tried to fulfill everything, and now you wonder why she doesn't respect you. Most men, honestly, won't even ask themselves those sort of questions.
Yeah.
But would any of us, honestly, if somebody's running around groveling, begging for attention, begging for crumbs of love, willing to do anything, could any of us maintain respect for anybody like that?
Right? If you flip it the other way around, I imagine a woman doing that to a man is not very pleasing.
No, it's not, and it would wear out quickly. We have a crisis, I think, of individual problems with
Yeah.
men and women. Part of it is rooted in the fatherless issue.
Yeah.
We don't have good masculine models. I'm sure you're aware of that. But just an accountability challenge on both sides of the fence
Yeah.
uh, that we appear to be failing at right now.
That's true. That makes a lot of sense. And I love what you said earlier, thinking about the mythopoetic movement. I I know a lot of men and women in these spaces, the wild man, kind of wild woman work spaces. And I find that what they're after is kind of undomesticating themselves and remembering who they are so that they don't let anyone push them around, man or woman. And like you said, it's great work, but it hasn't really gone mainstream or to the political space.
And I don't think it ever will. I mean,
Mhm.
in a way, and I don't deny that there's some value in the
Yeah.
work that there's doing. I absolutely do. But on the other hand, this also seems to me, if we look at it from the 30,000-foot view, a
Yeah.
nice way to avoid the real issues, the real things that are going on between men and women,
Mhm.
confront those things, sort them out.
Yeah.
We could just go in the woods and be primitive for a little while. And then guess what? You're still coming back to the city.
Yeah. You're still coming back to the over medicalization of boys, to the court systems, to everything that's going on. You're absolutely right. I totally understand what you mean.
I once had a guy in the mythopoetic movement. This was the latter part of it. This is going back to the early 90s, that he was writing about these issues, but he stayed away from anything political. And I talked to him about it, and I said, you're talking about these relationship issues, but I don't hear you confronting any of the really significant, compared to what I have men tell me in my practice that's happening in their lives. I don't hear any of this from your group of people. And his response was, well, I choose my battles carefully, which is a way to say, I'm not doing that battle at
Yeah.
all. I'm going to stay away from it. And I think that's part of what this does. It's a pretty healthy pastime. It's certainly not hurting anything, but I don't think it's really digging into the problems that we have
Mhm.
in any
Yeah.
meaningful way.
Yeah, I get that. I do. Fascinating. Because I've seen people change after going through some of these experiences, and I've seen, women that were a little masculine and entitled, and men that were soft and people pleasy. They'll switch roles suddenly, and
Yes.
it's great for them and their personal duet, if you will. But it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't go beyond that. It just stays there between the two of them.
Ultimately, the
Yeah.
and men in these roles of people pleaser, I've had an old saying my whole life: if you scratch a people pleaser, you'll find a very resentful person
Yes.
underneath. These
Yes.
guys that are what we call simping, uh,
Yep.
groveling for affection and love, they hate the women
Yeah,
of
they
their
do.
objects. They can't stand them.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as women, sometimes we can feel things really instantly, and there's nothing more clear when a man is like a very, very big feminist. You could tell there's some dark stuff going on back there.
Yes, there is, and they I remember Hugo Schweitzer a few years back. He finally admitted after years of male feminism and attacking men's rights guys that he just did it all to get laid. That was his point to begin with.
Yeah. So if we peel back the gynocentrism and just the for some reason our culture being so obsessed with just the women's perspective, what would life be like if we didn't have that? And what would be like a good model?
I think that if you peel back the gynocentrism, what you have left is humanity. We have to remember gynocentrism, the romantic model, this is an artificial construct. It was orchestrated and sold to the general masses, then reinforced by media. Then it had a boost from the Industrial Revolution that at least initially pulled men out of their homes and into
Mm-hmm.
the cities and
Mm-hmm.
separated men and women again. Um,
Mm-hmm.
we have all that going on. But if you peel that back, what you should have, I think I think the best model is the way that men generally approach each other. Is if you don't have anything to offer my life as a man, I'm not interested in any contact with you. If you
Mm-hmm.
don't reward me with some great conversation or some
Mm-hmm.
thoughtfulness or opportunities to improve myself or entertainment to do together that we both enjoy as friends, if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have any of that, I'm not going to have any kind of relationship with you at all. And I think if we could bring that into the standard for both men and women to judge whether or not they want to be connected, but you have to get the romantic clutter out of the way. If the first imperative is that I have to impress you,
Yeah.
then we're already starting off on the wrong boat.
Yeah, absolutely. Ugh, that sounds really refreshing and nice. That would be great. What do you think about this? I know Dr. David Buss did this study, 37 cross-cultural study around, in most countries, men typically look for, fertility and youth and, all of that. And women typically look for the resourcefulness, ability to provide. Is that biological, do you think, or do you think that is something that we've
Well, certainly, there's biological elements to it. I'm not near as biodeterministic as a lot of the red pill community. I mean, they've gone off the deep end with a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff. But I think those things are honestly prerequisites for initial sexual spark of attraction,
Hmm.
that sort of thing. But the problem is that with the romantic model, that spark, men are socialized to believe that's the only thing they're looking for.
Mm,
That if I find her body attractive, then she must be the one,
right.
right?
Right.
uh, famous last words, and those guys end up 10 years later saying, "Hey, coming to my practice saying I'm getting cleaned out. What went wrong?"
It's like they felt like, oh, I won, right? Back to that competitive thing, like, oh, I won, she chose me, but really missing
Yes.
all of the most important elements in general.
And imagine how much better men could feel about winning, so to speak, if a woman who chose them also had more than physical beauty to bring to the table, also had a lot of other assets that were great additions to his life. You can feel a lot better, but basically, with the romantic model, she already brings herself, which is better than you are anyway, dude.
Yeah. It's terrible.
Yeah, it's a horrible model. It's just a horrible model.
It's a horrible model. I
And
can't.
it's hard to convince women that it's a horrible model.
Yeah, but I mean, women are anxious, depressed. They have autoimmune diseases. Like 80% of those are all women. They're lonely, they're single, they're frustrated. What could be worse?
And 50 or 60% of them over 40 are on antidepressant or some other psychotropic medication. They This whole affair has made women miserable. I mean, Harvard released a study on the paradox of women's unhappiness, that with the more liberation, the less happy they became. It's like this sort of sails over the head of the public, but hey, we should be learning something here,
Yeah.
that this quest to become different versions of men
Yes.
and emulate men in your lives doesn't really sit too well with the female psyche.
It's terrible. And I just to share a story that I think maybe is a little more spiritual than anything else, but I went to a retreat in Australia and I got to meet this beautiful elder woman from Peru who was leading us through some ceremonial things. And she could tell where all of the women were at on their based on their cycle, just by looking at us.
Wow.
And I felt in that moment, it made me want to cry. I felt like I was really with this like elder woman, like a woman who really understood her womanhood, who really just loved her womanhood. We had beautiful conversations about the beauty of men, and it was just a magical moment. And I can't believe how
Such misogyny.
such misogyny. And I can't believe how disconnected women are from their bodies and their intuition and what it means to be a woman, you know?
And it's not something I see that so much of what you see nowadays, you see women that are just tatted up and the crazy hair colors and the metal in the face and stuff. I think that's a subconscious effort to reconnect to their bodies some way.
Absolutely.
Because they've dissociated.
Yeah, I mean to put 16-year-old, 15-year-old girls on hormonal birth control is insane.
Sure
It's
it
the
is.
same kind of child abuse, I think, as putting 8-year-old boys on Ritalin because they're a little active and aggressive. So,
But you can't question those things because if it even in the most false way possible promises more empowerment to a woman, even though it's certainly not, nobody's allowed to question it.
right.
Even if we make a wreck of their bodies with these harsh chemicals and hormones, can't say anything about it because of empowerment.
Because of empowerment. And that word is just the worst word in our culture. And I think because of the distrust, men and women just do not really understand each other at all. And what we have are just these like surface level representatives talking, and there's really no depth.
I agree. Personally, I think it'd be healthy for both sexes, for everybody, to take a couple of years in their life at least of being adult and totally single and totally focused on their own worlds, their own achievements, the things that they want and are important in life. And once you accomplish a good bit of that, then maybe the idea of a relationship. But right now, with the romantic model, we've got two halves trying to make a whole.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work out that way. So
Yep.
you got two incomplete people that try to complete each other through this romantic farce that
Yeah.
doesn't work. And
Yes.
so the relationship breaks up. I think the more complete people are coming into relationships, the better their chance at success.
I totally agree with you. And I'd say that also over the last few decades, we've had this push for therapists to be extremely soft and affirming to people and not really calling forth blind spots or pushing in the right ways. So we've got a lot of just weirdly soft people that don't have much accountability.
That's been going on since the 80s,
Oh,
since the
wow.
late night,
Okay.
about in the mid 80s, where the feminists really started taking over academics, and especially in the area of psychology and counseling. That became a very feminist dominated industry. It came up with this way back then. They were Believe the Woman before it ever made any kind of social media presence. All of this jargon, all of these ideas were going on in the 80s,
Yeah.
and they totally corrupted therapy. I don't think it helps women very much, and I know it doesn't help men.
Absolutely. I totally hear that. So I think one of the big questions that I do have is, what are the things that you still think that just people don't understand about men and what men are dealing with today? Just some of the things that come through your door. And yeah, I would love to hear.
I wish people understood how easily men are manipulated with shame and
Ugh.
how much of that manipulation results in their death and destruction.
Mm,
If there's one thing I could ever just inject into human consciousness
mm,
is an amount of responsible care with how
mhm,
we treat men, not
mhm.
kit gloves. Men don't need to be coddled or
Yeah.
anything like that. But I mean, you go back to World War I and the White Feather campaign with women running around handing guys white feathers, and they're so easily controlled by shame, they go into the meat grinder of World War One
Yeah.
rather than receive a white feather from a
Yeah.
woman on the street that they didn't even know. That's power. It's
Mhm.
huge power, and it goes to destructive ends. I think if we'd improve things a lot, if just a lot of the shaming would
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah, of course. And there's just the narrative around men and men being nothing until they do something. Women don't have that in their consciousness.
Right. Well, romantic model. The woman shows up. She has value just from being there. She need
Yeah.
do nothing, lift a finger, or anything like that. And the men do have to prove themselves. But I think that's an issue. I wouldn't try to work on women for that one. It's men that need to wake up and say, hey, if somebody is only giving you worth by what you do for them, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Period.
100%.
End of story.
100%.
Goodbye. You're out of here. If I have to do something for me to have any value to you, then I don't want to do anything. At
Right.
least not for you. I'll go do something for myself.
Right. And I imagine too, this is probably the hard thing for people to hear. And I think people that want to take ownership and agency for themselves will be happy to hear it. But I imagine a man who's bought into this idea that his only value is what he does, he might even attract a woman that only sees him for what he does. So it's like an inner work thing anyway.
Oh, I'd take it a step further. I'd say that many men, most of them actually, hang a sign around their neck that says, use me. Because for them, if they're not getting some sort of validation for what they provide, they don't even exist.
Totally.
And the idea of facing that solitude and walking through it is so forbidding that they would rather go with the hit to their self-respect by
Yeah.
hanging that sign around their neck.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
right.
but that is I encourage men all the time, man. Feel the fear, the loneliness, deal with it, walk through it. But
Totally.
if you got to produce something for somebody to even care about you, not the right relationship.
Completely agree with you. It makes me think of I knew this man who would only allow himself to sleep 5 hours a night unless he made a whole bunch of sales in his job. And then he would allow himself to sleep for 7 or 8 hours. It was that extreme. It was just the shame, right? Like the
Yeah.
shame. And I remember being interested in him and attracted to him. And he just wouldn't let me in because I was trying to mirror to him that he was great. But he just didn't think he was great, so he couldn't even see it. And so it was just that kind of stuff breaks your heart a little bit.
It does, but he's like a lot of guys. This is not exactly rare, what we're
Yeah.
talking about. I mean, this is
Yeah.
why I think guys buy a lot of hot cars and put on outward displays of affluence or whatever they've
Mm,
earned in life, is they're trying to make themselves have value.
mm.
And they have accepted that most women fall into that model. Most women, if you don't have a nice car, if you don't have that, they're going to get rejection. And my advice to them is to walk through the rejection,
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
feel it, and go with your own dignity and your own values.
Yeah.
But so far I've had several people listen to that advice.
Yeah. Yeah, of
Count them
course.
on two hands.
Of course. Of course. Yeah, it's so interesting the way that also just like our wounding and I imagine the separation that industrialization caused between men and women just in the macro, then separated man and wife, and then, then kids are born with all of these mommy and daddy issues. And so we're just trying to fill those needs with the people that we date.
Yeah, that brings in a whole lot of other dynamics that
Yeah.
we had to sort through. So there is lots of layers to this that
Yeah.
stand in between men and women. But
Yeah.
I also think, and I can use this as my personal life as an example of this, you can turn all that into assets. It takes time and
Mm.
patience and good deal of frustration. It's not easy, but after 23 years of working on it myself with one other person in my life, we've sorted through a lot of this stuff and it feels pretty damn good.
That's beautiful to hear. So I know that in the past, obviously, the way things marriage was something that you were talking about not doing, right? Because it's just not it's not worth it based on the way things are. How do you feel about marriage, the end, just in general now?
I feel the same exact way about legal marriage.
Okay.
I'm not legally
Okay.
marriage. My marriage is religiously based.
Okay.
Uh,
Beautiful.
but it has no law has a hold on me because of this. And
Yeah.
I still suggest to men to absolutely reject that model.
Yeah.
There is no reason whatsoever why a relationship should require financial vulnerability on the level that it does in marriages, where people
Mm.
losing their homes, losing their kids, losing more than we can even articulate. So much of what goes down in these hostile divorces is just life destroying.
Yeah.
Uh, why anybody would do it, it makes no sense to me.
That's so interesting. So, are you talking about just the law getting involved with finances in general, or do you mean like keeping finances separate as partners, even in a religious marriage?
I mean, no shared finances,
Okay.
nothing that can have you be construed as legally married in the eyes of the state. Now,
Got it.
there's states like Texas that if you live with somebody and you present yourselves as a married couple and do things like get shared car insurance, at some point they can declare that you're basically married and
Got it.
you have to go through family court.
Yeah.
I tell men to check their local law, that
Yeah.
a couple of $100 to spend 30 minutes with a family law attorney is pennies on the dollar to make sure that you're in a jurisdiction. And if you're not in a jurisdiction that keeps you safe, move.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Are you Christian?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm curious then when it comes to marriage, like under the Christian worldview, are there clear masculine versus feminine responsibilities? I'm curious how you think about that. I would love to hear.
Well, there's Christian responsibilities, and we've got instructions from the Apostle Paul on
Mm-hmm.
how men should
Mm-hmm.
behave. We have instructions in Proverbs on basically what women should. Interestingly enough, Proverbs talks about what women bring to the table.
Yeah.
It doesn't talk about elevating them romantically or anything of the sort.
Mm,
It talks about what they owe the family coming
mm,
into it. So yeah, there are defined things, but so much of this, there's lines that cross. In Proverbs talks about women earning money
mm-hmm.
that, that they've done with hard work to bring to the family.
Yeah.
So there's certainly biblical instruction that women can work.
Yeah.
And, and seemed to be the assumption written into that scripture that they worked and that they worked very hard, which during that time they obviously did.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
this Disney princess from the 1950s that we've conjured up out of Hollywood and all the other romantic programming before it, uh, that stuff is not reflective of 99% of human history and marriage. It was both people working their
Yes.
asses off.
Yes, absolutely. To be frank, the marriages and the relationships that I experience that are the most in sync and fulfilling seems to be people that have done some inner work, found their gifts, and have created a life path based on their gifting to then be of service to their community, and whether they charge for that or not, whether they make businesses out of that or not. But it's a woman who had a hard time with uh, eating and food issues when she was a kid, becoming a coach for gut health for women, helping women through that, and earning money through that. And it seems to be me that like we have these innate gifts and these drives towards certain paths. And I don't know, the keeping up with the Joneses 1950s model has made everyone feel like they need to achieve these certain milestones to be happy, and no one's happy.
And not to bring up a sore subject, but I
Yeah.
want to go back to something that Charlie Kirk said. Is Charlie Kirk's a guy I
Yeah.
admire,
Yeah. Same.
but one of the things he said was that as a man, until your wife has no financial worries whatsoever, you deserve nothing for yourself.
Oh.
You get nothing until she
Mm.
doesn't have a worry in the world. That's a horrible way to set up a relationship. It
Yeah.
just is. And
Yeah.
what you described, people recognizing their gifts, developing themselves, and turning that either into contributing to society
Mhm.
on a volunteer basis or making money, that's a good way to live your life, whether you're in a relationship or not. That would seem to be the great prescription for a happy life.
Right. That seems to be. I think I read a quote, maybe it was Abraham Hicks or something. She was talking about how, the greatest state of human consciousness is when people are in flow doing things of service based on their values. And
Yes,
it seems true.
I get to do that. And I never approach my work like things that I have to do. It's always stuff I get to do. For me, it's a wonderful way to live.
Yeah.
I really, happiness comes and goes, just like
Agreed.
anybody else, but I'm at peace almost all the time. And
Yeah.
it's hard to beat that.
Yeah, that's beautiful, Paul. I agree. I feel the same way, and I want others to experience that. And yeah, I think men and women finding some sort of middle ground and finding some sort of way to communicate. And I do think that there's so much great content out there if you just want to learn, you can.
Yes, there is.
Right? It's just people that don't want to admit that they're wrong or they've been wrong. That's where all the faults happen.
And to be fair to people, I get it. What I'm talking about here, when I'm talking about ditching the romantic model and going to this other, it is so profoundly different than the average person's programming, what they've been raised to believe, what
Yeah.
they've seen in Hollywood, what they saw modeled from their parents. It's so radically different
Yeah.
that it scares people. They're like, oh, no, I can't do that. I'll be alone forever. You might.
Hmm.
Uh, would you rather be alone forever or with somebody that makes you feel alone?
100%. So imagine you're kind of talking to a room of young single men and women, right? And you're really trying to convince them that, hey, the romantic model is not working. It hasn't worked for your parents, your grandparents. How would you advise them to be meeting and be going on dates? And then once they do feel like they've met someone that's really aligned, what would be the anti-romantic way to do things?
I would advise them not to date.
Okay.
Dating brings baggage with it. Just the word itself. This
Yeah.
is a date. It implies the man's going to finance it. It implies to some degree that a lot of women will interpret it as this is my opportunity to be wined and dined or to
Mm.
be pampered a little bit. And it's very romantic. So I would encourage not dating and just agreeing to do something together with each person carrying their own weight.
Mm-hmm.
You can work out a different financial arrangement later on if you decide you're going to pair bond, and depending if you want to have children, how you want to model the home, all that stuff, you can come to a different arrangement then. But why should I invest money just to find out if I'm compatible with a woman?
Yeah.
And I know already our imaginary audience of men and women, I've just lost the women entirely, and I've lost half the men. So
Yeah.
we're going down to an even smaller group. But that would be my suggestion: is
Yeah.
is forget the idea of dating. How about getting to know each other?
I agree. Oh, because even I think it's Alison Armstrong who I really enjoy as well. Have you heard of her work?
No, I'm not
She's
familiar.
she's been around for a little while. She's probably in her mid 60s. She wrote this book called The Queen's Code. It's she does a lot of helping women understand men better content. And she's been doing it since the 90s. But she says something like, no one wants to date, but everyone wants to be in a relationship. And so I feel like that's so true because dating suddenly people start to turn on their fight or flight, their reptilian brains, and all logic and reason goes out the window. They start thinking about sex. They just start thinking about things that they shouldn't be thinking about,
Well,
especially if they want long-term, true intellectual compatibility. And I think it's great. I've known women in the past that have been upset or would say no to men if they asked them to go for a coffee in the park or go for a walk, something free. And they would say, no, he should take me to dinner. And I've always recommended that they go to the park and see if they're even compatible.
I
So
want to ask those women how much they charge. I think it's a fair question.
mm,
If that's your standard, if there has to be, if the
mm,
guy's got to come up with the money, how much money? We'll just
mm. That's
get
a
this settled up
great,
front.
that's a fantastic phrase. I've never heard that before, and that it hits the nail on the head.
One of the things I wish we could do with young people is to teach them about the differences too between men and women. You mentioned meeting somebody and finding intellectual compatibility and connection and find one of the things that I'm not pushing back on that. I think it's important, but I think it's also important to recognize that we often, with the romantic model, we count on too much from the other person
Mm.
for this sense of emotional compatibility. I know I've even heard guys talking about finding their soulmates, and I'm like, oh Lord, get out of my head with that stuff.
Yeah.
I don't depend on my marriage for emotional completeness.
Hmm.
And there's several topics she and I just are not going to talk about.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean there's something wrong there.
Yeah.
Part of it is about respecting that there's women have different priorities in their minds and their thinking and their emotions.
Yeah.
Men have different priorities in their thinking and their emotions. They have different ways of approaching stuff.
Yeah.
And I think there's been a lot of sort of West Coastish
Hmm.
relationship advice about soul mating and being
Mm.
perfectly emotionally compatible and completing each other. No,
Mm.
if you need somebody to complete you, then you haven't done your internal work on your own. You're an incomplete
Mm.
person, and nobody's going to fill that void for you. And if you think they are, you're going to end up disappointed at them for not doing it when the problem was you. That's another thing I would try to educate young men and women on is to respect each other's individuality. You don't have to be joined at the hip in this romantic, I don't know where you start and I
Oh,
begin
so
kind
unhealthy.
oh yeah, it's horribly unhealthy. And eventually it breeds resentment and hostility. It is bound to. So I would try to steer people away from that.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a soulmate.
Yeah.
I don't believe it.
I agree with you. And this is something that is very common in some of the Russian circles that I'm in. I remember sitting with a group of women and a woman saying something, sharing a story, and someone saying, "Oh, have you told your husband about that?" And she was like, "Why would I tell my husband about that? He doesn't care about this." And it was so refreshing because she was like, "I don't tell my husband about these silly things that I tell my girlfriends. Like, he doesn't care. I love the kind of it's a little bit of mystery that we have, and that's nice. It works for them." So I thought that was nice.
And respecting that, guess what? Sometimes relationships are silent. This is something I wish of all the women I've known, I wish I could have got this across to them. Two men can sit in a bass boat together for 10 hours without 5 words passing between the two of them. And they're just happy, they're content. They don't have to be connected that way all the time.
Mm.
And uh, that is something I would try to help women understand about men. His silence isn't a form of rejection.
Hmm.
It's nothing like that. He's just occupied with his own thoughts, and guess what? That's okay.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. Oh man, I'm just still shocked that it's 2026, almost 2025. We have so much information out there and people still don't understand the opposite sex in ways. And Alison Armstrong has the thing where she says women just treat men like hairy women.
Yes,
And it's stupid, really, frankly.
it is brain dead level stupid. And unfortunately, it's not just women doing this. The mental health establishment has been addressing men for the past 40 years like they're just defective women. You don't cry enough, you don't open up enough. Well,
Yeah.
guess what? Men don't heal that way. Most men, if I could help women understand, we heal through action. We do things, we take on projects, we build things. That's how men process their emotional experience in life,
Hmm.
how they process grief.
Yeah.
You know, great story about Michael Jordan when his father passed. Michael Jordan had a very short stint playing professional baseball, and
Mm,
it didn't last. But his father always wanted him to be a baseball player.
mm,
And after his father passed, he went out and played baseball because that's how he dealt with the grief of losing his
mm,
father. He
mhm.
didn't need to talk to somebody about it. He didn't need a therapist. He didn't need a shoulder to cry on. He needed a baseball bat and a pitcher. And that's how men deal. We do it through action and through
Yeah.
kinetically. We're not wired just to sit around and pass Kleenex and talk about our feelings.
Yeah, 100,000%. And I know that there's ways that women are with each other that is very unique, and a man can't be with a woman in that way on an emotional level, specifically in the way that a woman would be with her. And so when she needs that type of thing, she needs to be with women. And so that's why people used to very clearly have these sacred sex spaces that were quite separate. And I know that that's a big thing in our culture too, the erosion of male-only spaces
Oh yeah, it's horrible what's happened. It's been destructive for men and women.
in huge ways, like the veteran spaces and all of that.
And you see part of the I think the pendulum swing coming back. You see a lot of people that would have, I think, stood up about the trans men or trans women entering women's sports. A lot of the non-responses from guys like me that don't care, that have felt like, look, you've been encroaching on men's space for the past 60 years,
Of course.
viciously, like with no Boy Scouts, women in men's locker rooms, everything. And now I'm supposed to be upset because a male got on your volleyball team? Sorry, I got better things to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's that, yeah, the gynocentric mindset. And it makes me think of that thing that happened a few weeks ago when he like called a journalist some name in the Air Force One
I
they
think
were
it was
in.
stupid.
Piggy something
Oh,
and something like that. And some woman wrote something like, the worst part about this is all of the men that didn't stand up to defend her, and I thought to myself, wow. And I think that came out on International Men's Day on the 19th. And I was like, wow, how just brain dead and opaque must you be to see it that way? It's so unfortunate.
oh, we've had news stories going for years now about men that won't stop and render CPR or mentor women at work because they're worried about the outcome of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you still, every time a woman, something happens to her somewhere, people are screaming, why didn't any men stand up? Well,
Yeah.
they're telling you why they're not standing up. And
Totally.
you should listen to them. But, far
Totally.
be it from me. If you want to be obtuse, go for it.
This brings me to a really interesting question. So imagine that, I don't know, maybe a couple generations have to go by, but we'll see. Imagine the accountability is back. Women have kind of figured things out. They are respecting and honoring men and understanding men and what they need and giving them that. Do you think that chivalry would kind of naturally come back? Or do you think chivalry is also a romantic idea?
Well, chivalry, I call it romantic chivalry.
Okay. Okay.
That they took the military code and then applied it to male-female relationships, with the male being the vassal and the
Yeah.
woman being royalty. In that case, it's simply an imprint there. So God, I hope not.
Okay.
And if men and women truly were looking at each other in partnership, in connection to both producing and having responsibilities for a relationship,
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine romantic chivalry getting into
Mm,
that. If that's truly the standard now, if you've got the dormant romantic chivalry waiting in the back of
mm,
people's minds to be let back out, I'm sure you could trigger it.
yeah.
But if the relationship is real on that level to
Yeah.
begin with, I don't see romantic chivalry being a problem. It would just be a dumb way to do things where
Totally.
something that is actually working.
That makes sense. And is this different from like the biological kind of drive towards? I know that this is something that people say all the time, right? Women just want to feel safe and men want to protect. We say this all the time. So if there was this honor and like respect between the sexes. Is it still true that because men are bigger and stronger, like they would be protecting women just out in society?
Yes and no, I think. And of course, this is all just speculation on my
Yeah.
part. I have
Yeah.
no idea what would actually happen. But I do know that part of the equation here, in terms of men protecting women in public, that sort of thing,
Yeah.
also goes back to father absence. You've got two generations now of young men that were raised by hostile single mothers bashing their fathers
Mm,
all the time. I don't think you just recover from that easily. I wouldn't say so. I
yeah.
mean, because what you see now, when every time somebody says, "Tell me why men didn't stand up," somebody will quickly respond, "Daniel Penny."
Yeah, and then you do have men standing up, even still, like in all these different, thinking about the Colorado movie theater shooting when the three men threw themselves over their girlfriends and the girlfriends all survived and the three men died. Those types of stories, I don't know. It seems biological in some way that when crisis hits or when there's war or when something is life or death, there is an expectation that men protect women. And I wonder if that's biological or not.
I wonder too. As with a lot of things, I'm sure there's biological influence with
Hmm.
it. I don't think it's necessarily all biological, because you also have men who don't jump on top of their girlfriends and
Yeah.
men who don't protect.
Yeah.
If this were genetically encoded by gender, men
Yeah.
would be jumping over women everywhere, protecting them. That's not
Yeah.
happening,
Yeah.
and men are doing less of this now than
Yeah.
they used to. So
Yeah.
it's socially influenced as well. So I'd
Totally.
have to say, yeah, maybe some genetic influence in there, but I think most of it is social. And I honestly think that men should quit doing it for a while.
Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
I think if we're going to have a reset between the sexes, we need a
Mm,
short period where all bets are off.
totally. Yeah, because you're right. Isn't it's the bystander stranger rescues? It's all men doing that.
Yes. And I think we're also at a place now where men have begun to realistically question. For instance, I've got somebody that depends on me, whose life would be terribly hurt if something happened to me.
Yeah.
Why should I risk my life for a stranger?
Absolutely. It's so
Uh,
fascinating. It's a really important question because it all goes back to the accountability, right? If women were had some duty in some other way that we all understood as a culture, then that would make sense. But yeah, it seems like we don't have that.
no, and I think if women really want to feel protected in this climate, in this day and age, in 2025, go buy a handgun.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't have it both ways,
And
right?
practice with it at the range. Get proficient at using it. Know
Yeah.
what you're doing. You
Hmm.
will feel much better about your personal security
Hmm.
everywhere you go. I
Yeah.
mean, it's not a guarantee of keeping you out of trouble, but I'm a 6'7" man, and I carry with
Yeah.
me because it makes me feel better and more secure.
So interesting. Oh, this is such an interesting conversation. I really love it. I feel like I'm learning so much from you. So thank you so
Oh,
much.
you're welcome.
Yeah, I'm curious. Where should we go next? Is there anything that you have just has been percolating as we've been talking?
Yeah, just a place that I've gotten to in the past few years is an understanding, and this goes back to the very beginning of our talk when you asked about the men's rights movement and
Hmm.
efforts like that. And what I try to get across to men now for the past few years is that 99% of men's issues go back to their relationships with women. All the stuff, the family courts we complain about, the unfair standards between men and women, the social expectations of finances, the pressures and that,
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff that men end up drinking over, drugging over, becoming violent over, all these problems go back to their relationships with women. I don't believe in blaming women for that. It goes back to men's choices.
Mm-hmm.
And I get some guys a little put off with me saying, "Oh, I had no way of knowing that she was this terrible person." Yeah, you did.
Mm-hmm.
You did not screen her. You did not test her character at all.
Mm-hmm.
You did your best to please her until she said yes. And then down the road it turned sour. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how these things go. But what I wish we could have is a lot more discussion, and unfortunately, you won't get it out of the modern manosphere about men's accountability. We can control this stuff. When it's funny how when I made the decision in my life in my 40s that I would no longer tolerate a woman who disrespects me, I haven't had to live with a disrespect problem since then.
Yeah,
Doesn't happen.
absolutely. You're so right. And I just to say, like, on the other side of things too, I always have the occasional women writing comments and asking, I have a lot of videos on understanding men and just the male perspective because I find it to be interesting. And there'll always be the comment that's like, well, how do I protect myself from abusive and violent men? And I always say that, you know, I think I read this in Why Men Behave Badly, Dr. Buss's book about, the true abusive men, the truly abusive men, and what they look for is they look for really low self-esteem and low self-esteem through body language. And I always say it has nothing to do with the men. It has everything to do with who you are and who you believe yourself to be and just what you allow near you. And nobody wants to take that kind of ownership.
I always have taken sort of exception with the notion of self-esteem. And I
Okay.
think this plays into what my response is to your argument here
Yeah.
is, yeah, I agree with you. I mean, totally. But self-esteem is a very ambiguous. How do we
Mhm.
know where our self-esteem is?
Mm. Mhm.
Is it at 50%, 70%? We don't have any way of knowing. We like to believe it's at 100%, or if we're in a bad place, is at 0%.
Mhm.
You know what we can measure?
What?
Is self-respect. I know every moment of every day whether or not I'm treating myself with respect. There is never any ambiguity about it whatsoever. And if I'm not treating myself with respect, I'm not going to feel good. When women ask, how do I avoid these abusive guys? Like, get in the mirror, lady. Just get
Mhm.
in the mirror.
Yeah.
If you put up with abuse from somebody, it's because you choose to. If the first time the guy calls you fat as a way to make you feel bad about yourself, if you're not gone then,
Yeah.
whose fault is it?
Oh, yeah. 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 And
So, I mean,
true.
this is not rocket science.
It's not
It's
rocket
not like,
science.
oh, gee, how do I tell and avoid
Yeah.
abusive men? Well, when you see the abusiveness, you leave. That's how you do it.
100%. And if you find yourself in those patterns, because this is just what requires a little self introspection, if you find yourself in those patterns over and over again, there's obviously a psychological thing that you're dealing with that you might want to get some counseling for.
Counseling or simply better decisions.
Yeah,
I
that makes a lot
mean,
of sense.
and there's I think counseling, the typical cognitive therapy, sort of the cathartic emotional release
Yeah.
of therapy, is a lot more suited for women
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
it is for men.
Yep.
I hate men getting put into that mold and
I
sitting in
agree.
an office with a box of Kleenex next to them,
I agree.
expecting to get anything done. I think that's helpful for women, but I really do think personal accountability is more helpful than therapy. The answer to why a lot of women are with abusive guys is because they were attracted to them.
Yep. Yeah, that's absolutely right. It reminded them of some very familiar hellish situation they experienced when they were little girls, and here they are.
Or it reminded them of something dangerous and it turned them on.
Yeah, that's true too. That's 100% true. 50 Shades of Grey and that
Yeah, oh,
entire
absolutely. That stuff is real. And I have the same reaction. I know I can often sound as very misogynistic. There's no empathy for women who have problems. I'm the same way with men.
yeah,
It's like we bring our problems on ourselves in life,
yeah, yeah, we
and
do.
the sooner you wrap your head around that, the quicker you can stop living a crazy life.
We do. You're so thoughtful and lovely to listen to. So thank you.
You're
Um,
very welcome. I've enjoyed the talk.
Me too. I have one last question, I think, and then
Sure.
I'd love to wrap it up. One thing that occurs to me is your success in your relationship over the last 23 years. And I would just love to hear some of the things that you either experience or that, some things that you make sure that you do with your partner that work really well that you didn't have before. And just so people can kind of hear like what is working really well, maybe from both the masculine and the feminine perspectives. I would love to know.
Well, gosh, I'm sure I probably will fail at a good answer to this because it's so complicated what goes into a
Yeah.
relationship. There's so many, two different family of origin histories. I mean, there's so much that it's hard to put your finger on anything. But if I had to say the most powerful influence was that I don't tolerate any disrespect. And what I mean is I don't want to disrespect her and I don't want to be disrespected. I consider it my job to be the relationship's guardian of respect. That if respect is lacking, we're going to back off until we regain the respect and then we can come back in. But until then, nope, I'm going to be just as stubborn and dogmatic as I can be. This isn't going anywhere in an atmosphere of disrespect.
Mm.
I think that honestly is the best contribution I've made to the relationship
Mhm.
because it taught both of us.
Mhm.
I had to hold myself to my own standards,
Mhm.
even when I was angry, and I failed many times, and so
Yeah.
did she.
Yeah.
But as long as there's a baseline requirement for respect, and we
Yeah.
both understand that 98% of the time, it prevents the catastrophes and the really bad arguments and anything destructive from happening between us. And it's 99% of the time it's calm and wonderful. And
Yeah.
even if it's not, the excitement of new romance, it's stable, comfortable, secure,
Yeah.
and it doesn't feel like anybody's about to get screwed over. I like it that way.
That's great. I like that. You know what I think is the biggest difficulty that I experience from women and men is that it seems to me like women don't understand respect in the way that men do. It seems like they don't understand the definition, they don't understand the importance, they don't understand how much it matters. That's the disconnect.
And I think that is one area where, and I tell this to guys all the time, if she's going to learn the skills to be in a respectful relationship, you're going to have to teach it.
Mm.
And sometimes you're going to have to be somewhat paternalistic about it.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're going to have to be rigid.
Mhm.
It's not going to be comfortable.
Yeah.
But women are raised, at least in terms of relationships, no expectations. You can't, I need to be who I am. You can't, all this sort of self affirming nonsense.
Yeah.
And then men come up against that, and it's okay for a few months or even a year while you're infatuated because you're not looking at all the flaws.
Yeah.
But after that, when the infatuation wears down, you start noticing the disrespect
Yeah.
and it builds resentments.
Absolutely.
So I try to tell guys from the beginning, you need internal control. You need to manage your own anger. You need to manage how much respect you're delivering.
Yeah.
You need to give it at all times and hold yourself to a brutal standard.
Mhm.
And you hold her to the same standard and don't let it slide. Not a little bit of it, not ever, under any circumstances. And that will either break the relationship or make it a good one.
I totally agree. That's so good. I think that's so good. I think men should sit down and actually just try to explain how they see respect to women. Because I just don't think women have the conversation about respect at all. And you can easily say, like, would you treat your employer that way? Right? It can be that simple, but I think there's probably more
Or
like,
how would you feel if I talked to you that way?
yeah, exactly.
And if they're honest, they know they wouldn't put up with it. I mean, because
Yeah.
that's the one thing. And again, these double standards that are romance influenced,
Yeah.
women often feel like they can dish out what they won't take.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if you allow that to fester in a relationship, you're making a big mistake. And the biggest thing men need to learn is that any woman in their lives at any point, they need to be willing to let go.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
That if
Mm-hmm.
she just isn't going to learn to
Yeah.
administer respect to the relationship, if she cannot handle adult accountability and she proves it time after time after time, you may have to let it go.
Yeah, that's very real. And man, I'm really rethinking the romantic model in such a big way, thanks to you. So thank you.
Well, you're quite welcome. Great
Yeah,
conversation. We can do
really
it again
great.
if you like.
I would love that, Paul. I thank
Okay.
you. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your week. And any last words to the audience? It's mostly male, my audience, actually.
Come visit me at XY Crew. You can follow me on Twitter at Real Paul Elam, and look at my link tree there to my books and all my other garbage that I'm selling. Come visit me there. Look forward to it.
Love it. I'll add all those links also to Paul's Substack down below for you guys so you have access to him and all his goodies. Thank you so much, and until the next one. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for being here and for your support in this mission that I have to bring men and women closer together with the information that we all need to find more harmony with each other. If you found value, please help me grow the pod, and you can do one of two things. You can either share this episode with a friend, which I would love, or you can write me a review on Apple or Spotify, or you can do both. And finally, if you are looking for transformational coaching, you can book a one-on-one call with me, and it will be my pleasure to support you in this next season of your life. Till the next one, you guys.